This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 357 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about how two losses against Leverkusen and Gladbach have put Dortmund in peril of reaching their minimum requirement of finishing in the top four, and we will preview Borussia Dortmund's home match against Augsburg, and of course we will have a quick peek at the cup match against Paderborn, which I think is also a home game. For all that and more, join me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Stressful week as always.
That's very well. And also joins me Lars Pollmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I am as always quite tired, but otherwise in decent spirits.
That is very well. And of course, I'm very glad to announce that we have a sponsor for this episode.
Wir sind komplett schuldenfrei. Wir zahlen keinen einzigen Euro an Zinsen.
And this episode is sponsored by Jordan Hunt, who says he wants to lift the spirits. You've done exactly that, Jordan. So thank you very much. And he wants to encourage us to have a discussion about center backs, which I will, instigate toward the end of the show. But in the meantime, Lars, Dortmund did lose 2-1 against Bayer Leverkusen, first DRB, taking advantage of a Birki long kick, and then Julian Brandt equalized in the 67th minute, and Florian Wirtz then scored the winner in the 80th minute. It was an interesting game. We predicted that it was going to be up and down and pretty open-ended, and I think it was a game that either team could have won in the end. However, it was not the black and yellows. Why?
Full disclosure, Stefan, when I agreed to come on today, I completely omitted the fact from my brain that we would be talking about the Leverkusen game, which is too far back now for my 31-year-old brain. So I'm trying to piece together what I actually remember about this game, and that is a absolutely horrendous Dortmund performance in the first half, or the first 35 or so minutes, which was a big talking point afterwards, going by what both coaches and players and sporting directors and whoever said, but also a decent enough, I guess, performance in the second half. Especially after the goal, I felt that there was a real momentum shift. But as always with momentum shifts,
they shift.
we were proven quite quickly that such a thing doesn't exist, because obviously Leverkusen kind of scored into what was arguably Dortmund's best spell in the game. And I think after the second goal of Leverkusen, I don't really remember if there was a big chance for going level for Dortmund.
Thomas Delaney had a header, as far as I recall, but otherwise, no.
Yeah, so if two of us don't remember, and I'm pretty sure there weren't too many great chances, so I think there's no shame in losing to Bayer Leverkusen. This version of Bayer Leverkusen is pretty good. A lot of talent in that team, but certainly the first half performance, especially considering that a few days later they wouldn't be too much better against Gladbach in that regard, something to have some issues with, which they did.
Yeah, Matthias, what does your 42-year or 43-year-old brain remember about Leverkusen?
43. Thanks for remembering, Stefan. I always liked Lars more than you. Lars is right in saying there's no shame in losing to Leverkusen. There is a shame in losing like that to Leverkusen. Dortmund having that good spell, and actually it looked like the momentum was shifting and Dortmund would come away maybe with the win. Definitely not a loss. And then you have that counterattack that just was bad bad positioning, and, Wirtz had a good goal from distance. Interesting was also that the majority of shots that Leverkusen had were from distance. It does show a little bit, Dortmund sat a little bit deeper, or they were a little bit more compact. They were also pushed that way. Looking back at the stats, what surprised me actually was over the full 90 minutes that Dortmund had more possession. That was not a statistic I would have expected. Overall, Leverkusen deserved the victory. Dortmund once again horrendous in conversion. Yes, Leverkusen outshot them, but it's not like Dortmund didn't have shots. It's not like Dortmund didn't have opportunities. They just didn't utilize them at all. Julian Brandt, I can remember very distinctly, even though he got the goal, he also had a chance very shortly after there to give Dortmund the lead, where that was kind of the miraculous off the line clearance. And, I tweeted about it a few times during the match, and I kind of talked about it in the previous Yellow Wall episode, and I'll say it again. I'm very concerned about Rafael Guerreiro in a defensive sense as a left back, because I'm seeing a disturbing trend of him not really working hard in a defensive sense. He'll go up the pitch, which is fine. Attacking fullbacks are a norm. He'll play a bad pass or lose possession, and then he'll just hang out up there. And then the other team is transitioning, and Dortmund are just, basically all over the place because they have gaps to fill. Everyone shifts one way. Someone's going to be left unmarked. And I said it before, I'll say it again. If you're going to be a defender who pushes that high up, especially knowing that the width is predominantly coming from the fullbacks with Dortmund, so there's not a lot of wide cover. If you're going to go that far up, you better run back and defend, and not go back at all or kind of jog back. And positionally, he was all over the place, and it didn't get better in the next match, and it wasn't good before that. So that's really an area that I have some concerns with, that if you would have asked me a month or two ago, I wouldn't have even really brought up, to be honest.
Well, I totally agree. I think we've all seen that. And I think it's maybe a symptom of tiredness. What's annoying me more about the situation, and Lars, I really want to hear your thoughts, is that, we do have a left back sitting on the bench that was, that did cost about 20 million plus. And he is not being really utilized. And so the left back that we currently have is probably one of the key players of the season, obviously, but also getting fatigued and hardly any rest. So in that context, how poor of a decision was it to buy Nico Schulz, maybe? And what do you make of Guerreiro's defensive lapses, which he obviously is not the only one in the team who's this happening to, Mats Hummels. But yeah, I really would like to know what you think about this whole malaise.
I mean, we don't have enough time to fill a full show with how bad Nico Schulz or the transfer was, but I mean, I think we've covered that extensively in other shows, so people can just listen to the back catalog of all of us whining about them wasting 25 million.
Oh, was it 25? I didn't have the confidence to say it was 24 million plus or so. So, but yeah.
I mean, potato, it's about 20 more than I would have paid for Nico Schulz. So, having said that, I actually agree with Terzic not to play him. I think that would be a sort of a sunk cost fallacy to actually play Nico Schulz at this point. I could see the argument made for Felix Passlack, but he's completely phased out under Terzic. Could actually also see a version with Mateo Morey playing on the left side, which he can do, has done in some preseason games under Favre. So I think that would be an option. And honestly, when I was thinking about, because you always ask what we would do about the lineup and whatever, I think it would be a good idea perhaps to free Guerreiro from some defensive responsibilities while also adding to the attacking output if he was just playing one position further ahead. Because obviously you want his creativity on the pitch, you want his nous for playing the final ball or the penultimate ball into the box. So you can't really say Guerreiro needs or should be rested completely. Dortmund can't afford that really. At least not from the get-go. Maybe you can take him off in some games. But it would probably be best for him if he could play either as a left-sided 8 or just as a left winger. And especially given the lack of winger depth in Dortmund's squad and, Julian Brandt and Gio Reyna both being more central players, being made to play out wide and not the other way around. I think it would make sense for Guerreiro to get a run as the left winger actually these days. But certainly some of the issues defensively are directly tied to him. But I think when we start pointing fingers as to who is at fault for all these Dortmund issues and goals conceded, I think you could start with Roman Bürki, go over Mats Hummels, go to Guerreiro, go to Akanji. I mean, we wouldn't be able to stop. So I think whenever that is the case, it's probably not 15, 20 decently talented players making all wrong decisions and being bad in the moment. It's probably more of a systemic issue.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does have tactical issues, and it's quite interesting that both Leverkusen and Gladbach really tried to force Bürki to punt the ball, and I think Leverkusen, especially with that goal in the 14th minute, really excellently capitalized, because Dortmund, when Bürki has the ball and everything is static, their center backs do push out wide and the fullbacks up even a bit higher, and then if you have a quick counter attack, then everyone is obviously very far away from potential strikers, and the ball over the top is then easier to achieve. And I think Gladbach tried to do similar things. So, but at the same time, if we look at that goal, that the Leverkusen goal, the first one, it would help if the header or the rebound of Bürki's shot by a Leverkusen player would at least be contested by a Dortmund player. I think this time was Jadon Sancho, who was more or less just, standing there. We've just talked about the NBA pre-pod, and there's a way to defend in the NBA in the playoff season, and there are ways where a bit more bodiless in the beginning of a season, and that's how I was reminded basically. That's just not good enough, and a bit vexing. Overall, I think what's pretty vexing about the entire Englische Woche, if we will, I mean the point against Mainz is obviously not good enough, and obviously a game Dortmund arguably should have won. And the other problem is Dortmund did have good spells against both Leverkusen and Gladbach, and they easily could have, well, not easily, but they could have come out as winners, and then the entire thing would have looked quite differently. I mean, we don't even have to talk about Bayern Munich anymore. I think now they're down like 13 points or so, and I think they're closer points-wise to Bielefeld right now than to Bayern Munich. It's just a gruesome week for Dortmund, and especially against your direct opponents, to lose like that is never great. So, Matthias, if we think about the Leverkusen game and the Gladbach game, usually Dortmund, lose against Mainz or draw against Mainz, and then you say, bottom of the league, but at least they do well against teams from the higher ranks of the league. And I mean, that was correct if you look at the Wolfsburg and the Leverkusen match, but the last two ones, I think, had a lot of people really frustrated for various reasons. I think when we look at the Gladbach game, especially conceding 3 set pieces or 3 set piece goals is just super annoying. But what do you make of this game, considering that Dortmund did rally back from a 1-0 deficit, and one would could have thought for a minute, they actually are turning this around and they're playing well, and maybe come away as winners, but I think it just took 4 minutes for Gladbach to equalize with yet another set piece. So I don't want to dwell too long on the Leverkusen game. So what do you make of this Gladbach game, and how do Dortmund come back from that?
Yeah, so it's a tough one, because if you look purely at the statistics of the match, if we just look at the very cold, not even nuanced statistics of the match, Dortmund should have won. They were the dominant force in pretty much every single statistical category, from tackles won, passes played, pass percentage, shots, etc., etc. The difference is, as you had mentioned, obviously set pieces, and the conversion rate and shots on target percentage versus total shots. Dortmund again didn't have a single shot within the 6-yard box, so that meant they were a little further out, but they didn't rely on long shots. Over long spells, Dortmund looked the better side, looked more dominant, looked like, okay, after turning the match, it looked like Dortmund were going to possibly roll over Gladbach at that point, because they had so much going their way. And then the rest of the match happened, and it's frustrating. You said before we recorded, you said, when you watch the Packers lose, it kind of reminded you of the fact that in the NFL or in American football, everything's a set piece. It's a set play. That's true. Whereas obviously in football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, it's a very fluid game aside from set pieces. So in a fluid game, certain situations you can't really practice for to counteract certain things like you can in American football. Having played and coached it, you can definitely see tendencies and set up your defense in a way to stop it. The only thing in the Bundesliga you can do that with, or in soccer, football, is obviously in set pieces. And the fact that Dortmund are the second worst team when it comes to conceding from set pieces, only outdone by Schalke, and not by much, and the other teams in there with them are Hertha and Mainz. So 3 relegation candidates. That's just not good enough. And what makes it even worse is Marco Rose saying, it's great to score 3 set-piece goals. We don't even practice set pieces. That when I heard that, I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. If that's something you actually want to brag about, it's a little weird. To me,
well, you came out on Twitter and said, "Oh, he's the perfect coach for Dortmund," and I harshly, vehemently disagreed. That Dortmund are, we talk about natural-born sad pieces, as I like to call them, because this team needs to only train them. It feels almost, because nothing else apparently helps them to defeat their set piece disease, which is weird because there was a period where it was, biting them in the butt every other week, and then they stopped it, and now it's here again, and I don't know why. I mean, it's not like I sat down with my laptop and reviewed every set piece and took a deep dive, but it does feel kind of annoying that all of a sudden you have, I think, Emre Can or someone like trying to cover 3 other guys, and like Elvedi, who's maybe not the set piece monster, then scores 2 on you, which is just super annoying. But continue.
Well, Nico Elvedi, I don't even think is that tall. He's not even that strong for a central defender. So yeah, it's frustrating because it's very clear. It was said after the match. You can point to Gladbach, Köln, and Union Berlin as 3 matches Dortmund lost because of set pieces. Now, it's not only set pieces, but that's the most direct result you can look at. Obviously, you have to look at what led to the set pieces. What is that situation? But at the end of the day, there are 2 things that clearly play into this as far as set pieces go. And FC Bayern aren't that great at defending set pieces this season either. They've conceded 6 as well 6 this season, which puts them also in the 6th or 7th worst in the league. But, they score 53 other goals to kind of make up for those 6. It's concentration and focus. That's a huge part of it. I can still see Gio Reyna just letting a guy run past him. And that's concentration and focus, or not marking the right guy, or, that's stuff you can't let happen. And the other thing is just coaching the situation. I don't know. Did whoever was able to shut down the set piece problem that was there, 2 seasons ago? That was very clear. Who was able to coach and shut it down? Did that person leave with Favre? I mean, is that part of it? Because it's just so in your face, obvious. And no, I'm not a certified UEFA A licensed coach or anything like that, but you would think that set pieces is something that you can kind of focus on and take care of relatively easily, given that teams that are lower down are able to do it sometimes.
Well, my super licensed coach big brain theory is that it's just so windy at Brakel that the balls fly in a different way, and when you play at a different stadium, then you just calculate the path and the flight of the ball entirely different than at the training ground in Brakel. So that's the only rational thing I've come up with. But in all honesty, Lars, do you have a better explanation than mine?
I mean, having been to Brakel, I can at least confirm that it's very windy there. I wanted to say another word. Michael Zorc has been asked this question, and Edin Terzic has been asked this question, and the only thing they can come up with is concentration. I mean, Michael Zorc basically gave the exact same answer the last 2 times I read or heard him be asked about set pieces, and that is, it's not about size or height or physicality. We are well equipped in that regard, and I mean, they obviously are. They have enough players with the requisite physique to handle a ball whipped in from the side of the pitch. So it must be down to concentration, but I mean, I would certainly agree with you guys that one would think that's a problem that can be bettered by working on the training ground. And certainly Terzic has had more weeks to actually prepare for games and have honest to God training sessions than Favre had in his last 3 months or so at the club, because he had to contend with all these Champions League games and international breaks. So it certainly doesn't reflect well on a very young, inexperienced at the pro level coaching staff that this is a problem that has gotten infinitely worse the more time they've spent with the team. I mean, the Union game was in the first week after Favre was sacked, and now it's been a little over a month, and it's arguably gotten worse and not better.
So, Lars, that obviously leads me to my next question now that Dortmund have slipped down to 7th place in the Bundesliga, and as I said in the intro, the minimum requirement or target for them reaching a top 4 finish is very much in peril. Do you think, in hindsight already, it's maybe still too soon to say, who knows, but do you think as of now, with Edin Terzic having, I've been told, a worse points average than Thomas Doyle, do you think it was the wrong call to sack Favre?
No. The question is, was it the right call to install Terzic as the main man with Otto Addo and Sebastian Gebhardt as his assistants? I think there's the logical theory to me is that they wanted someone to take over only until the summer, while they were going to work on getting presumably Marco Rose on board for the summer, and wanted, the prolonged caretaker situation. In that sense, it made more sense to go with Terzic, who presumably could go back into second fiddle roles after the end of the season. But obviously, knowing what we know now, and I mean, we haven't even talked about, the completely ridiculous lack of substitutions that he that he seems to be completely oblivious of the fact that they can make 5 a game, because they only make like 1 in the first 78 minutes or so per game. And there are a number of players who haven't even played a single game under or tops 5 minutes under Terzic. And, the schedule is not going to get easier going forward. So I would like very much for someone to remind him that you can actually make 5 subs in Germany this season.
Okay, so Lars, before you continue, let's stay on the substitution thing real quick, because you've talked about a number of substitutions, and I think that was one of my main gripes with Lucien Favre, that he his substitutions were sometimes too late and too little. This has arguably gotten worse, but also the substitutions that Terzic is making right now. For example, we saw, I think, twice the substitution of Bellingham out and Moukoko in. We had Jonathan Harding on here, and he, quite clearly said, and correctly said, in my opinion, that, if you can't get anything going, taking out another midfielder and one of your better ones that actually makes, constructs a couple of connections and link up play, maybe not the best call. Lars, what's, just from the tactical standpoint of the substitution that Terzic is making, the few, what have you made of them? Because I've been rather critical so far.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is once again an indication of an inexperienced head coach who's probably gotten too big a job way too soon in his career. I mean, as John said, you can't take out someone who actually makes things happen and is arguably your most complete midfielder at this point of the season, which is a problem in and of itself because he's 17, but here we are. And just stick on another striker or attacking player and assume that things are going to get better and you will be more dangerous. I mean, the actual worst part, in my opinion, is actually that most of these games he's also brought on Steffen Tigges for the last 5 or 10 minutes to only then hoof long balls forward, which Moukoko, that's arguably the biggest weakness of his game. I mean, obviously he's 16 and has a lot of weaknesses at the pro level, but in theory, if you have Moukoko and Erling Haaland on the pitch, you want to release your strikers. You don't want to just play long ball after long ball for Steffen freaking Tigges, who's been a Regionalliga player up until 5 weeks ago, to make things happen for you. So on top of not using players like Mahmoud Dahoud, which there's now been a report from Ruhrnachrichten that there was a disciplinary problem and that seems to be resolved, but I'm sure there's some residual effect of that. On top of not using everyone at your arsenal when things clearly aren't working, to again and again try the same things that aren't working as well. Again, that's not a good sign. And I think it was Luca who actually tweeted, and it made perfect sense, that Lucien Favre always brought on center backs when he wanted to defend the lead, even though that never worked. And now Terzic apparently wants only to bring on strikers when chasing a lead, and that also doesn't work.
Yeah, no, that sums it up quite well. I mean, against both Leverkusen and Gladbach, I think he brought on Moukoko and Tigges in the last 10 minutes or so. And I think in the Gladbach game, he also brought on Gio Reyna for Reus. So it's at least good to see that Gio Reyna is back. Dortmund still desperately, I would say, waiting for Torgan Hazard to recover from his injury. I think there was an update today at the press conference, but the problem is I kind of dozed off. So I'm not entirely sure what was said. But apparently he's returning soonish. Yeah. If I recall correctly, Thomas Meunier is now out for a longer period. I don't know how long, couple of weeks or so, with a knee injury, right? So that's a bit of a headache, and that means Mathieu Moret will probably slot in against Augsburg and the Paderborn match. And of course, the other problem is, as we've said before, is fatigue. We only have 2 healthy center backs right now with Akanji and Hummels, his form has been absolutely dire, and I think that has contributed to the losses in a very impactful way. I mean, against Gladbach, I don't know if it was the first or the second one, but he sort of played a misplaced pass and then, committed the foul, which led to the set piece, which led to the goal. Obviously, I do like to mention that Emre Can and Marco Reus should be experienced enough to not let a ball slip directly between them if they build the quote-unquote wall, and then obviously Roma Böke can probably still deal better with it and gets a little flack for it, but nevertheless, something that annoyed me to no end. But back to my original point, with Zagadou being out for a couple more weeks, this is obviously a problem. And Mats Hummels, I think, has said quite often enough that, the players overall are fatigued. And I think he would very much include himself in there because, let's face it, he was one of the better players this season up until his form tragically dipped. And in this current level, you see a Mats Hummels whose decision making is just a little slower than it usually is, and he still tries to anticipate passes and storms out of defense, leaves his back line exposed, but then is just sort of stranded and leaves other players open against Leverkusen. I think he did it once so brilliantly that Florian Wirtz was completely open. I mean, for the actual counterattack, there are also numerous mistakes we can talk about. But it's a problem when your center back or the leader of your backline, if you will, make such silly errors that everyone is then just scrambling, and you just have to hope that your opponent is bad at finishing above everything else. It's also not ideal when your goalkeeper is sort of super glued on the touchline and just can't rush out a goal like a modern goalkeeper would. But the list of things to rant about is steadily extending, I feel. So Matthias, when we look ahead now to the Augsburg game, that is obviously a match where Dortmund lost the reverse fixture. That was the first loss of the season, and by now Dortmund have accumulated 6, which is just as many losses as they had all last season. Now, Augsburg are obviously a team that Dortmund can struggle against mightily. Last time, as I said, they lost, but in the last away match to Augsburg, I think it was Erling Haaland who came on and sort of turned it around. But it's going to be a tricky game. Is it a trap game for Dortmund, or do these things not exist given that Dortmund are only 7th in the Bundesliga right now and not really flying high as is?
Yeah, I think that's more the case. I mean, it's a trap game if you think you're going to be dominant and win and no problems, and then you play Hamburg. But that's not the case here. You're playing
of our trap games.
You're playing against Daniel Caligiuri, so yeah, there's that. It's not a trap game in that sense. I mean, it's clearly a game that, Augsburg are at a dip. They've lost 4 of their last 6 matches. And
I think they're in 12th place right now, aren't they?
Yes.
I don't have it right in front of me, but
yeah. So I mean, they're weaker now. They started the season extremely well, and they've really flattened off a little bit. Before beating Dortmund back then, they beat Union Berlin, and the last match, Augsburg beat Union Berlin. So there's a little bit of a trend there that I don't like, and I'll be honest. The fullback situation, and I'm not on top of it right now as to who is missing for Augsburg, to be perfectly honest. I've been so focused on the Dortmund issues that I haven't looked if Vargas is around and so on. I don't think Dortmund can win this match, no matter what. Because if I am Augsburg and I'm looking at the last few matches, and I go, let's see, we've got Matteo Morey on one side, who's, yeah. Then you've got Guerrero on the other side, who's tired and who won't track back. He'll be out of position. Then you've got Hummels, who then feels like he has to make up for a lot of things and gets caught out of position. And you have Akanji trying to do anything to make up for that, and then a Delaney or a Chan running back, and Bürki, who is bereft of confidence after the last 3 matches. Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think it's a trap game. I think this is going to be a match that Augsburg win, and I don't think. I think it's going to be the typical. Dortmund have a lot of possession. They're going to be static. Augsburg are going to sit deep. They're going to have some set pieces. They're going to score from them. Moukoko is going to come on for Bellingham. Then nothing happens because Terzic isn't a good manager all of a sudden anymore. He thinks he's playing FIFA. So I'll be honest, I have zero confidence. The trap here's the thing. If it's a trap game for any one of these teams, it's an Augsburg trap game. because they may be too confident going against this, because everything that's going wrong for Dortmund is playing directly into the strengths of Augsburg. The funny thing is, when we talk about set pieces, Augsburg are the worst this season with scoring from set pieces. They've only scored from one set piece, Stefan. And do you know against whom that was?
Was it Dortmund?
Yes,
Caligiuri?
it was Daniel Caligiuri against Dortmund. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember how often over the last 8 years of doing, almost 9 years of doing this show, that I've picked against Dortmund, and I could probably count it on one hand because I'm the eternal optimist. I don't think Dortmund have a chance to win this match, if I'm perfectly honest.
But that makes me way more optimistic now, to be honest.
Okay, fine. It's a trap game for Augsburg. Dortmund win it 2-1, and Daniel Caligiuri scores a set piece. But in all seriousness, now this is going to be a very, very difficult game for Dortmund, and I have massive concerns.
Well, out for Wolfsburg are Framberger and Moravec. So at least according to Kicker, what I think is often a good bellwether, if the schedule sort of allows it, is to see how a team has performed against Bayern in previous matches. I think there was a good indication for the Mainz game, maybe, where Mainz were, I think, 2-0 up against Bayern and rather well, but then sort of lost. And Bayern recently also did play against Augsburg. I think it was the Wednesday game, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am. I don't remember. But what was interesting is that Augsburg were, I think, one missed penalty away from at least coming away with a draw. And in the first half, it was pretty much all Bayern having shots on goal, and in the second half, it was pretty much just Augsburg having scoring output. So you can see that Bayern are very frail and fatigued almost, and were sort of, I don't want to say overpowered by Augsburg, but pretty much that's sort of what happened. I didn't see the first half, but I saw parts of the second half, and I was rather concerned for Dortmund, seeing how well Augsburg did and how Bayern allowed them sort of to play the ball around. And this is obviously something that Dortmund can do as well, especially considering that at the Westfalenstadion this season, Dortmund have not found the home strength that they usually do have without any fans. So, Lars, what do you expect from this game, and which problems do you hope Dortmund can solve against this Augsburg team, which they did already lose against once?
Well, what you don't know, Stefan, is that this is actually a Freaky Friday situation, and Matthias and I have switched bodies because I'm actually quite optimistic about this game for once. I hold out hope, perhaps against my better judgment, that these players and everyone around the team has finally now understood
Sure.
Where they went wrong so much over the last few games only. And I mean, we've talked about it in a very and obviously warranted negative light, but you could also say that for large chunks of certainly the Gladbach game, and I would say also the second half against Leverkusen, they were quite good against very good opposition. So it's not like they are in complete dire straits. This isn't a 2014 they might get relegated situation. And third place is 3 points away. So while I usually appreciate every bit of doom and gloom on this podcast, and most often am personally responsible for it, this time around I just kind of have a hunch that it's not going to be as bad as Matthias pointed it out to be. Still, though, I mean, games against Augsburg usually aren't fun for Dortmund. I mean, I think they've thrashed them a couple of times here and there, but at least in my memory, more often than not, those were kind of more like dogfight games where, there's a lot of many fouls by Augsburg, many discussions with the referee, not a lot of flow to the game. The obligatory, now that Caligiuri plays their set-piece goal for Augsburg against Dortmund.
Or a counterattack.
Which we've talked about. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to expect like a 4-0, everything's great about Dortmund again kind of game. But I also don't see how they have, and I'm quoting here, no chance of winning against Augsburg at home, because even if Dortmund have a lot of issues, we are still talking about FC Augsburg, who just don't have that great of talent in, a lot of these positions.
Yeah, so I don't even know if I want to say I'm more with you, Lars, but it was sort of the point I was gonna make after Matthias said that Dortmund have little to no chance, is because exactly that. I think if we look at the game against Mainz, Dortmund were very unfortunate to not win this one and only have their poor finishing to blame. And I mean, in terms of how you want Dortmund to approach a home game against a team from the bottom half of the table, this is actually it. They were aggressive from the get-go. I mean, yes, they lost their way a little bit in the second half, but nevertheless, if Dortmund managed the same thing against Augsburg and are a bit more clinical in front of goal, this game can be out of reach, and then it can turn into shellacking. Who knows? The other positives you can take away from the games against Leverkusen and Gladbach, albeit they were lost, is that Dortmund really did have good spells, and when they had good spells, they were overly dominant and created good chances. I mean, we haven't really talked about the 2 goals that Dortmund scored against Gladbach by Haaland, but I thought they were all very well crafted, and obviously against Leverkusen, I think Dortmund even won the quote-unquote expected goals battle, and obviously Julian Brandt maybe needs to just hit it toward the goal and not try to square it and then hit Tapsoba or whatever his name is. But I digress. I do think Dortmund can obviously turn it around on a whim, and they had a whole week now to rest, which I think helps, especially after playing Tuesday and Friday. At least they had one more day of rest, and this team, I think, was in dire need of that. Now, I don't know if it's just a media thing or whether there's actually something to it, but Lars, I think, if I recall correctly, there's a chance that Marvin Hitz may start the game against Augsburg. If that is the case, do you think that's a wise move to make? I mean, Roman Bürki has caught a lot of criticism in recent weeks. However, if I recall correctly, you were rather miffed by Lucien Favre. I think you said unnecessarily opening a goalkeeping discussion at the start of the season. So this would sort of continue that, wouldn't it?
No, because at the time it was unnecessary to make a switch and not give any kind of explanation. And it's been, with good sources too, been reported that, there were also no real explanations towards both men and the team. So now that Roman Bürki has played like absolute dog poop for at least a month, and, we know without confidence Roman Bürki, with all his issues and qualities, the issues are confounded and the qualities are a bit dimmed by lack of confidence. I think at the moment you have every right as a head coach trying to turn things around to think of switching to who is arguably, or I would say inarguably, the best number 2 goalkeeper in the Bundesliga. If this was, who should be number 1 going forward, I think you could still make an argument that Roman Bürki just has more potential also with the ball at his feet. But then again, also in that regard, he's made so many mistakes that it might be better to appreciate a more solid, stable goalkeeper in Marvin Hitz and just tell him to hoof it, not to the other guys, whereas Roman Bürki tries to play it to his own players, and sometimes it doesn't come off and leads to goals. So I think for this Augsburg game, I certainly personally would very much prefer Hitz. I would probably just play him till the end of the season and get a new number 1 goalkeeper in the summer. I don't think that's necessarily likely, given that they extended Bürki's contract in June, was it? So some point late in last season. But yeah, he's certainly not been been a help. He's been more part of the problem than part of the solution, in my opinion.
All right. So, Matthias, now that you've been so pessimistic, I think I'm glad I can throw this question or maybe more an initiative to talk about it at you, is that I personally observed that Julian Brandt has a bit of an upswing in form, and since this is the Julian Brandt hive, led by Lars Pollmann, obviously this one goes out to you, Matthias. What makes you hopeful that his upswing in form, he even found the net in Leverkusen? Arguably, okay, maybe because it was his old stadium and he still knows where the goals stand there, but what makes you hopeful that this continues and carries over to the Augsburg and maybe even Paderborn game?
I mean, I'm just glad to see that all it needs for positivity and optimism from Lars is some negativity and pessimism from me. But Julian Brandt has been, not just Julian Brandt, also Jadon Sancho. We can't forget he did assist both Holland goals against Gladbach. They've had a very good uptick in form, and that's something that Dortmund definitely needs, because you need that creativity. You need that spark, you need that movement, and that's definitely been there for the last couple of matches. Ironically, not the matches where Dortmund won, but in the ones where they've lost. So, silver linings being what they are, it's the right uptick in form for the right player against the right opposition that's coming up. You're going to expect, deeper sitting, parking the bus, all that kind of stuff, because when the first time Dortmund played against Augsburg, the clear issue was there was no movement. The positional play was non-existent. Players kept on moving into cover shadows and not moving out of them. And, Brandt's creativity was missing for the longest time because he was lacking confidence. Now that the confidence is back, I think the timing is actually good to play against some of these sides to see if he can really help unlock them. I mean, part of the problem will then also be the movement ahead of him. We know Holland's going to give you that movement, but it has to come from multiple sources. And I mean, could this be a match where you don't play Marco Reus and instead you put Julian Brandt in that more 10 central position and have Gio Reyna coming off the wing? Maybe. Even though I do have my issues with Giovanni Reyna. I think, Brandt could maybe even benefit from that, even though I feel like you would miss Reus's pressing, which is good. But Brandt being there and playing creatively is definitely needed against these types of opponents who will make it very hard for Dortmund. So, no, overall, definitely good timing for that. If he were still in that deep form, my pessimism may have been even worse.
All right. I think it's time for you to predict the scoreline then. Very intrigued now. How are you going to go against Dortmund?
I mean, yes, I was pessimistic. Mm-hmm. I was talking myself a little bit also into a rant just because it's frustrating and I can see Dortmund's weaknesses. And when you match that against the strengths of Augsburg, it's not a good matchup for Dortmund right now. I do agree with you that if Dortmund get a couple of early goals, then Augsburg will fall to pieces. That's just the way it's going to be. I just don't necessarily have the confidence that that's going to happen.
Yeah, if you explain that, just give the scoreline.
I mean, it is a home match, but without fans. Oh God, it's so hard. But I'm going to stick to my pessimism. I'm going to say Augsburg are going to win this one 2-1.
All right. I'm saying Dortmund are going to win this 3-1. Lars, what's yours?
Same.
All right. So with that, I think we can move over to the cup match, which I think happens on the Tuesday after. And there's not too many things I can say about Paderborn because I do not watch the second Bundesliga. But I can say that right now their top scorer is Chris Führich, who I think is a Dortmund player. He is loaned out from Borussia Dortmund 2 to Paderborn, and he is number 27. It's the tall blonde guy. I think he's playing on the right wing usually for them. So it's nice to see that he is doing better, I guess. I don't know if it's going to be good enough to ever see him for the seniors, but nevertheless, I mean, he's 23 years old and he's born in Castrop-Rauxel, which is not very far away from Dortmund, obviously. Someone just told me that Castrop-Rauxel is the Latin word for Bergkamp, but I'm not entirely sure if that's correct. So, Lars, all kidding aside, I think Dortmund once pounced Paderborn in the cup 7-1, and Stefan Effenberg was the coach, and maybe even Mario Götze scored a nice free kick in that one. But it's a very long time ago, and I don't entirely recall. Might have been a nice free kick that Götze scored in a cup match against Hanover. That one I definitely recall because he scored it underneath the wall with a flat shot that was really nice. But I digress. So obviously with Bayern Munich out of the cup, every Dortmund fan will now hope that maybe this is the consolation trophy that Dortmund can win at the end of the season. Is Paderborn, in the way they play, a threat to Dortmund? Obviously, I'm so well prepared that I don't know who Paderborn actually got rid of in the German Cup thus far. But maybe you can help out there.
I can't, but I do remember something for once, and that is Roman Bürki trying to dribble in his own box. Typical goalkeeper panache. Getting the ball taken away from his feet, and Paderborn actually went in front, I think, in that 1-7 game under Stefan Effenberg. As for the current season, yeah, you mentioned the danger man in Chris Führich. He actually scored against, I watched the game and I forgot, I think it was Kiel on Wednesday night. I mean, Paderborn, still coached by Steffen Baumgart. Obviously, they were only relegated last season in the Bundesliga. Dortmund had a 3-3 in November at home, where Marco Reus rescued them at the death.
The Julian Weigl game, as I like to call it.
Yeah, I didn't watch that game live. I had to watch a rerun the next day with a terrible wine hangover, which is not recommended. And in Paderborn, that was the game where Sancho et al. Honored George Floyd with their celebration. So that's certainly a memory to have in mind. The game itself, I think, was like a 6-0, and it was yeah. I was about to say you need to get your trigger finger ready for that one. Yeah, I mean, it's a second division side, not near the top of the table in the second division. So, I mean, there are absolutely zero excuses to not win a home cup game against a side like that. I think Dortmund have been decent in avoiding the pitfalls of the cup for the last decade or so. I think the last time they went out against a lower ranked side was early in the Klopp tenure against, was it Offenbach?
Yes.
I seem to remember that was the last time. So
yeah. Lewandowski
since then it's
missed
been
a penalty and Barrios, I think, too, in the shootout.
I think since then it's only been Bayern and now twice Bremen to actually beat Dortmund either before or in the final. So, I mean, do we really need to talk about what Paderborn play like and whatever? I think in the cup at home, Dortmund, there's no excuse if you go out. I mean, heads should roll.
All right. Matthias, your prediction, will heads roll, or do you want to say anything about Paderborn? Because I still have that question from Jordan Hunt I want to throw at you.
I mean, Paderborn, nice town, you know. I mean, it's Ostwestfalen, so it's like, it's all right. You know, it's a nice university town.
It's not Münster, okay?
No, it is not Münster. And
but it has a nice livery.
And if anybody compares Paderborn to Münster, you're dead to me.
Heads will roll.
heads won't roll. They'll be on spikes on the top of the Lamberti-Kirche.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you're not gonna have your head on a spike. You'll be put in a cage. And then
that's right.
Start.
That's right. You go to the Wiedertäuferkäfig. Anyway, I think Dortmund's going to win this one 4-0. I think this is a match that, will be, I mean, not easy, but easy enough. I do hope there's a little bit of rotation. Please give some of these guys a little bit of a breather. Obviously, that'll also depend on fitness and so on. But I think Dortmund will win this one. I'd actually, this is the kind of match where I'd want to see Moukoko start as a striker. And then if things aren't going, then you bring in Haaland for Moukoko, not Bellingham. Okay?
Would be funny though. Why not? I mean, we can obviously talk about rotation and whatnot, but 4-0 is a good prediction. Last, did I ask you? I already forgot. I don't think I did, so go ahead.
Because I think they are going to rotate, but at the same time be a bit more economical about their approach. I don't really think Dortmund absolutely thwack second division sides in the cup over the last few years. Since that Paderborn game, I'm going with a more modest 2-0 win for Dortmund.
It was also my prediction. I think we're copying off each other somehow. So, but yeah, 2-0 is also my prediction for this one. Obviously, after that, Dortmund play against Freiburg. So I really do hope that Dortmund rotates in accordance, because that's going to be a very tough game. Freiburg, one of the informed teams right now in the Bundesliga. But Matthias, since we have a sponsor for this episode, and said sponsor wants to know which center backs to target in the summer, I'll give you the microphone, since I don't know heck about anything. So maybe you do know more, since Dortmund do need to improve on that position, probably most drastically. I would argue maybe even in January, but I
mean, if we're looking at the summer, and obviously a lot of it'll come down to finances and the situation, but if we kind of caveat all that, I wouldn't mind Tapsoba from Leverkusen. He's played exceptionally well. He played well against Dortmund. Upamecano sounds like he's going to go to Bayern. So, there's that. But I like Tapsoba. I mean, if put on the spot without any preparation, thank you, Stefan. I would have, that'd be one that I'd really like. I'm struggling to think of a lot of central defenders that are good. Just off the top of my head, that Dortmund would be in a position to sign. But yeah, that's the first name that kind of jumps to the front of my mind.
Fair enough. Last, the vultures are obviously already circling around Marvin Friedrich from Union Berlin. Is that a viable shout in your view? If not, who else?
You will not believe it, Stefan, but once again, we are absolutely aligned, because that was the name that I pulled out of my you-know-what. Now that you, without any preparation, I can only echo what Matthias said, bestowed this transfer market question on us. Now, in all seriousness, I think that would be a decent, relatively low-cost signing. I think I personally am kind of over this signing, like the next 18-year-old from France who's angling for a move the moment he sets foot on the windy Dortmund Brakel training grounds. I think it would make sense to get someone German also, or at least able to communicate properly, because let's face it, Dortmund isn't the kind of club that gets people talking German. If you look at a lot of players that have been here for a couple or 3 years or longer, who still don't really speak German, and Edin Terzic is, I think, the only head coach in the Bundesliga who speaks more English during the game than German. At least that it feels like that. I'm not going da at this moment here, but still. So Friedrich is a very good aerial presence. He, in my opinion, should be a contestant at least for a spot on the Germany Euro squad, because he's playing a very strong season for Union Berlin, not only but also scoring goals, which is always nice. I think he could be somewhat of a in pure footballing terms, spiritual successor to Neven Subotic in that, he's a proper defender, if you like. Not necessarily great in build-up situations, but you still got Mats Hummels, you got Zagadou. Presumably you have someone in midfield who can progress the ball, so I think that would be a good pairing. The only issue being that he has ties to Schalke from his upbringing. I think he played for them at the youth level and might even have played a couple of games here and there for at either the under 23s or even maybe the pros. I don't necessarily know, but still, that I think this is the kind of player that you can target even in Corona times, because he shouldn't be too high in the 8 figures. I think you can probably get him on a sensible deal, and that is the kind of transfer that I would like to see from Dortmund, because it's a 25-year-old player whom you will get for the best part of his career, and there aren't many for whom you can say that in terms of Dortmund.
Yeah, I think Dortmund should sign Stefan Bell so I can say saved by the bell. So I think that concludes our who to sign, which center back to sign in the summer. I think we should go back to that, because there are obviously a lot of moves, potential moves that Dortmund should do. Matthias, I think Michael Zorc left himself the possibility open that things do happen before the end of Monday, which is when the transfer window of this January shuts. Anyone who you see come in or more likely go out?
Geez, Stefan, give us some time to prepare for this.
We haven't even been here for a whole week or so you had plenty of time.
Yeah, right. Well, thinking about it, as I'm scrolling through Transfermarkt. I mean, I'll be honest.
This is much more fun than having you prepare, actually. This is
no
far
kidding.
More enjoyable.
Yeah, hearing me squirm. I'll be honest,
Yes.
I can't think of anybody. I mean, there are a few youngsters, again, that have been rumored. One of the weirdest ones on there is Locatelli from Sassuolo. That's just an odd one. And again, young guys, Florian Neuhaus is thrown on there, but he'd be a lot of money. I just don't. I'll be honest. If Zorc pulls somebody out of the hat at this point, I have no idea who it would be, and in what position he'd be bringing somebody in. I would like it to be defensive oriented. I think that's an area where Dortmund are clearly lacking depth after injuries and so on. So. Maybe someone who can play either fullback role very well, not serviceably, but actually very well. That'd be kind of nice. Especially if you could then move a Guerrero further up the pitch. That would be very nice. So, but looking at the list of people that are being rumored, they're either not going to happen, just because of money, or again, like Lars said, it's another 16-year-old wonder kid. It's like we're playing Football Manager and just gathering all the new gens. That's not really going to help Dortmund now. Maybe help them in 5-6 years, but Dortmund needs help now. They need help for the next 18 to 24 months, not the next, 48 to 72 months.
Yeah, Lars, any center backs you can think of that Dortmund can add to their squad now, considering they have 2.5 available at the moment?
Well, I'm still quite enchanted with my own idea of signing Neven Subotic, who's a free agent since last week, to be somewhat of like a standby player, be on the bench, but not really playing too much.
No, it's a great idea, because then we could get the old band back together. All we need is Weidenfeller to train some bicycle kicks, and then
Yeah, I mean, you laugh, but Subotic played, I think, 24 games for Union Berlin last season. So I mean,
he wasn't too bad either.
He's up there. He's definitely not as good as he was before his injuries at Dortmund. But I mean, you are looking at signing someone late in the winter window with little to no money spent. And obviously Subotic would not only be presumably a dependable, at least bench option, but also he's a swell guy and someone that I think Dortmund would do very well to incorporate in whatever capacity he likes, basically, when his playing career is finished. So if he's like a social responsibility officer,
we do need a sporting director.
whatever fancy name you have for these roles in, community engagement or whatever, I think that would be perfect for Subotic. And he's not that old. He can still do, a backup job. So if you are looking to sign someone, I don't think they are. I think that would be a logical version.
Yeah, I mean, Dortmund will probably just hit the button on their position naming creator, and then you will have Neven Subotic be like vice president of the transition from amateur to professional player department or something like that. I think it's a good shout actually. So I agree. So now I think we've talked enough. Borussia Dortmund will be playing on Saturday morning Eastern time, so it's the 3:30 kickoff in Germany against Augsburg. So make sure to tune in for another dose of fun and sad pieces. In the meantime, Matthias, how can people get in touch with you if they want more Rafael Guerreiro rants?
It's not rants. It's pointing out obvious errors in a very vehement, loud tone and using all caps.
Yes.
If you want to call that a rant, if you want to put labels on things, Stefan, that's your problem.
No, that's my job. That's not my problem. That's what I do here.
You can find me on Twitter at Matthiasuk.
Very well, Lars.
Yeah, you can still buy Lars Pollmann stock on Robinhood, and also find me on Twitter at Lars Pollmann.
Well, I would actually appreciate some community engagement. So if you want to comment, either on our YouTube channel, our Twitter, our Facebook, which you can all find at Yellowwallpod. I would like to know from you people out there which no word Mahmoud Dahoud used to get on Edin Terzic's bad side, because while it was reported that apparently he has used a bad word or insulted the coach or whatever, it was quite conveyed what he'd say. So I think we should interpolate that or extrapolate or whatever you want and fill in the blanks. So I really do want to know from anyone what Mahmoud Dahoud possibly could have said to upset Edin Terzic that he was set out entirely. And with that, I'll say this. As always, thank you for listening. You can find me at Stefan Butzko on Twitter. You can find all of us at Yellowwallpod, and you can obviously also shoot us an email at yellowwallpod@gmail.com. If you want to contribute financially, like Jordan Hunt, you can go to patreon.com/theyellowwall. You can subscribe to us via iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. And of course, we shall be back hopefully next week after a win against Augsburg and proceeding to the next round in the German Cup. Until then, as always, stay safe and goodbye.